Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting with Darrin Lowe from Domaine Anderson from the Anderson Valley. Welcome, Darrin, and tell me a little bit about yourself and the winery.
Hi, Allison. Thank you. And my name is Darrin Lowe, and I'm the winemaker for Domaine Anderson. Domaine Anderson is the most recent project for the Louis Roederer family. And so the Rouzaud family, who owns Louis Roederer in Champagne, founded Roederer Estate in the late 80s, and after 35 years, was able to acquire a winery, the Domaine Anderson, to start making still wines. And so Domaine Anderson makes still wines from the Anderson Valley, from the estate, Roederer Estate.
Fantastic. Now, I know you're producing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. How many acres of land do you have, and how many cases a year are you producing of these wines?
Okay, for Domaine Anderson, we farm specifically 50 acres for still wines. But the holdings for all the sparkling and for the still wine is 600 acres, but 50 acres of it is just specifically for still wine. And most of that is organic, and some of it is biodynamic. With the eventually, we're going to be all biodynamic.
And what are the markets that you're selling your wine in?
We're in all 50 states. We have an estate bottling the Chardonnay and the Pinot. Those are our larger production wines. About 1,200 cases, 8 to 1,200 cases for the Chardonnay estate, and about 28 to 3,200 cases for the Pinot Noir estate, and that's in all 50 states. Then we have our small vineyard designates, our single vineyard wines that are only sold out of the tasting room. And we just opened a tasting room in 2016. And so it's a estate and wine, or tasting room and wine club wines.
Well, we'll remind people that they'll have to visit at the end of this. But before we get to that, tell me your first memory of wine, relevant to wine.
My first job in wine, I'm not like tasting, so that's with family, but like something that pops in my head was the time where I didn't really know a whole lot about wine. I was working in the Dry Creek Valley doing pump overs. I was 17 years old. I was doing pump overs and working harvest, and everything was really new to me, but I opened the fridge and stuck what I thought was some chocolate mousse that was kind of left over from the party. Was not chocolate mousse in the fridge, but was actually a big glob of yeast, which was a little, I didn't put a whole spoonful in my mouth, but it was a little queasy, and that was just some random funny thing about wine. So,
but that didn't turn you off to wine.
No. In fact, it probably got me more interested. Like, what is this stuff? Like, why do you have all this living stuff here? And what is it? What does it do for the wines? And how do you make it? And that really kind of piqued my interest. And remember, I was 17 years old, so didn't know a whole lot about wines at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something I remember from my first early years.
What was the first or most memorable wine you ever drank?
It has to be the 87 Cabernet Sauvignon from Jordan Winery. It was the one that I really thought, wow, this stuff is really, really good. And I was pretty young, then, and didn't have a whole lot of wine tasting experience. Although my folks had a wine shop that we started tasting wines, a little bit, dabbled in it at home together. And but we had an 87 Cabernet from Alexander Valley, Jordan, at the dinner table, and it was just like a memorable wine. I was like, wow, this stuff is good. And I really, it was soft, it was rich, really delicious stuff.
Sounds like a good memory to have.
Yeah.
So I know that you were telling me before that you've traveled the world abroad and worked in France as well as in Oregon. Traveling the world abroad, which is the best foreign wine you've ever drunk?
Oh, gosh. I think, I love Burgundy, and there were some really outstanding whites I tasted in Burgundy, in Montrachet. But I really enjoyed my time, actually, that same trip. We went over to Piedmont afterwards, had the family with us, and it was a wine from Gavi. It was like this simple white wine that was from a biodynamic producer, but there was a restaurant there. Everything about the layout, the food, the the generosity and the hospitality of the Italian people. It was really just like a very memorable wine experience. And I think, and Gavi's like a pretty simple white wine, but this is something I remembered, like the hospitality. It was a good feeling, and plus my family was there, and so it was just a nice experience overall.
Do you remember the worst wine you've ever drunk?
The worst wine I've ever drunk. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but no, I can't say the worst wine I ever drank. No, it's just not fair, right? It's like drinking bad coffee, right? Like you come across it every so often.
Yeah.
And it's all bad, but you don't really, you just don't drink it.
Yeah, you just don't want to revisit it. Fair enough. Among all the populations of the world, who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality?
Probably the French. I mean, there's all the great wine producing regions are there. They have access to it all. So, in Paris, I mean, if you go to each region, it seems like they have they're pretty provincial and local, and they like to drink their own stuff. And plus, it goes with the food that they make. Mm-hmm. But in Paris, you go to your local caviste, and they have all sorts of wines there, and like the special little guy that that they only know, and the wine shop owner is like really into them, and they can really lead you on a good like tour of France, and to really open up your palate and your mind and try some different things. But yeah, I think the French have a lot of different wines, a lot of different variety, and they have their choice.
So do you have a cellar? I do, actually, and well, it keeps on getting filled with other things other than wine. But I have about I'd say a couple hundred bottles in there, and a lot of it's like older cabs that I really, I don't know why I'm hanging on to them for so long. I probably need to start drinking them. They're from like the late 80s and mid 90s, like California cabs. Mm-hmm. Jordan, some of them, and a lot of flowers, a lot of places that I used to work at. But yeah, my cellar is there because I pretty much drink the wines that I buy. And so I don't necessarily cellar my wines, but the stuff I have that's old is probably the old cabs. Yeah. What would you say is the most expensive bottle in your cellar right now?
There's a wine I brought back from Italy, and that's a Bartolo Marscaloni or something like that.
Okay.
It's I don't know why the name escapes me now, but they have like artists do their Barolo. So it's from Barolo.
So as a winemaker or as a drinker, do you think there's a perfect variety?
Perfect variety. I think there's a perfect expression of that variety. The most I drink is Pinot Noir. So I guess to answer your question, that's the closest to me. When it hits the right notes, it's really sings beautiful.
And what's your opinion of wine critics and scores?
These are great questions.
We just like to put you on the spot here.
I think there's definitely a place that could help you. And I make wines that definitely, I'd rather have a good score than a bad score. But you just got to be careful because that lends itself to all sorts of other avenues when you go, like when you're just trying to make wine for the critics, So, I make wine because I like the wines, and I make wines that I like to drink. But then I like to drink the wines that are grown in a specific place and that show the specific variety as well as the site and the appellation. So critics, there's so many different kinds of wines, and to have like say something is 100 points and something is, there's a place for it, but I'm a little dubious about like why that is 100 points or why that is but most wines are in the 90 point range. They're they're solid wines, but I think the consumer really can grab a hold of a number and be able to make an immediate judgment from that number. But if you drink a lot of wines, and if you're already, they take critic scores, with a grain of salt.
So getting down to wine as a consumer, do you prefer red, white, or rosé?
Red.
Still or sparkling wine?
Still.
If you had to pick sparkling wine, champagne or something else?
Good question.
Especially when you're affiliated with both a champagne house and a domestic sparkling house.
I mean, I'm going to take the easy way out and say there are times that I enjoy both or either. But gosh, if I had a chance to taste like great champagnes, I would think I'd have to like go with that just because of the reverence I have for champagne.
So what is your belief on pairing food and wine? Do you follow the rules of white wine with fish, red wine with meat? Do you like to break the rules? How do you approach that?
I mean, I think when at home, I for instance, I think sparkling wine goes great with everything almost. You know, there's like that little sweetness there. I mean, I'll drink sparkling wine with a steak. I mean, it doesn't necessarily hold up in the classic sense, but it goes down deliciously. and so like when I pair at home, I don't necessarily stick with the traditions, but the one thing that I insist on my wines having to pair with any foods really is acidity. So any like flabby wines that are muddled, that's really, I don't really have a place for that in what I cook at home or what I drink out, or it's just not what I like.
So we all have a tendency sometimes to drink a little too much wine. Do you have any special remedies for hangovers?
Water. Water and just like no loud noises is my remedy. I think that's how I survived when the last time I had a hangover. So,
what do you think a non-drinker loses out by not drinking your wine?
The ability to transport themselves to Anderson Valley through cuisine and wine. Mm-hmm. And Anderson Valley is a special place, and not a lot of people know about it. But I'd like to get the word out about Anderson Valley in Northern California. And that's one great thing about wine is to be able to travel the world in a glass. Mm-hmm. And think about different cultures and different cuisines. And so, yeah, that's the thing they're missing out.
So if space aliens were to land on your property, what wine from your cellar would you want to give them to taste? Or what wine from your winery?
I'm partial right now to the whites coming out of the winery. So like the 15 Domaine Anderson Chardonnay. I mean, it's something that any alien will enjoy.
We won't scare them off in the least. So as a winemaker, they say that each vintage tells a different story. I think you would agree with that. Do you think that there are more things that repeat themselves or the opposite?
I think there's general trends. So, I mean, and that's what making wine in the same place and over time that will show you. So, yeah, so things repeat themselves, but every year is different. So it's a little of both, but you can learn from stuff by repeating itself. And so that's how I think you become a better winemaker, but also learning to be responsive to the conditions of that vintage.
Do you have any good luck rituals for when harvest is about to start?
I drink a bottle of sparkling wine, open a bottle of sparkling wine with all the the employees and the team. Because every year we get like a new intern, and so just to break bread and to sit down and relax before everything gets just crazy hectic, so that you just have a chance to sit down with the folks you're going to be going to battle with.
And are there any signs or omens that you capture each year that will predict the outcome of what harvest will be?
Signs or omens? Like a raven or something?
I don't know.
Oh, gosh.
I've been told some look at weather, or if it doesn't rain, or maybe they look for a flower to bud. I don't know. Is there anything you look for?
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. So like a marker of the season.
Yes. It could be a raven.
Right. It's not a raven. I pay attention to the moon. I pay attention to, we're biodynamic, so I do pay attention to when the moon starts to rise in September in the horizon. Mm-hmm. So I do believe that that's an opportunity for the fluids in the ground and the plant to start rising, and thus it's influenced by the moon going up in the horizon. And so that's the time for harvest, especially in September. So like I pay attention to that.
With those biodynamic principles in mind, a lot of winemakers will walk in their own cellars and speak to the wine in the barrels. Do you talk to your barrels? And if so, what do you say?
I don't necessarily speak to them in the barrel, but I do play classical music when I'm tasting. And it prepares me. And I also listen to other types of music, but in the cellar, I listen to classical because it prepares me, it sets me in the mood and clears my mind so that I can really concentrate on when you're tasting 60 barrels at a shot, and climbing around the barrels on top of it, I need to have sound be not a distraction and also soothing. And so playing classical music, I think, helps put me in the mood to kind of concentrate and pay attention to my other senses.
So some people read tea leaves at the bottom of a cup. If you could read the bottom of a red wine glass, what would you like it to reveal?
Deliciousness. Yeah. So I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, at the bottom of a wine glass, there's tartrates, and so like you can see but that's not a sign of not necessarily a sign of a great wine. It's maybe a sign of an older wine, but yeah, that's I would love to see at the bottom of a wine glass be completely satisfied with the wine that I had just drunk.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I guess a teacher. I really thought maybe that was it was a good. I had liked my teachers growing up. My folks were meat cutters, so there was a time where I was like going to be a meat cutter. But then I, became vegetarian in my college years, and but now I would love to like be cutting meat again, as well as, butchering up a pig or something like, something. But I love what I do, and so. But as a little kid, I didn't really necessarily know I was going to be a winemaker.
Do you do any sports?
Yeah, I mean, currently I'm a pretty devout yogi. So at least if I can get away like once a week, I gotta take time to tune everything out and kind of get into myself and my breathing. Other than that, I run, and my kids play basketball, so I shoot hoops with them every so often. And the older I get, the kind of slower I get, so I gotta like kind of take it easy a little bit. But it's I like to stay active.
Are you a supporter of any sports teams?
Yes, unfortunately, right now it's football season. I'm a Raider fan, so we're not doing so hot now. In fact, it's frustrating. But my wife and thus my house is our Red Sox fans. She's from New England, and so there was some celebration last week.
Yes, so they won the World Series. So for the team that won, or if your Raiders ever won, what bottle of wine would you present them with?
Oh, Cristal. Gosh, why not? That's part of the family. And closer to home would be like a L'Hermitage, but something celebratory, something that says, you know what, congratulations, and this is a great feat that you just pulled off. And I've loved watching you go through all your struggles to get there.
What is your favorite film dedicated to wine?
The one immediately that comes on top, is Sideways. I'm not sure I think it's a fun film, but I like, so I'd have to say that, yeah, it's dedicated. It's kind of in and around wine. It shows really opened up some doors for Pinot and California wine. And so yeah, that would be it. I have to say a film dedicated to wine. Yes.
So I know you said you have kids, but if you get that really romantic evening with your wife, what is the wine that you would order?
Well, I can tell you the wine that I ordered when I proposed to her.
Okay.
It was Pinot Noir from the Central Coast. We were Big Sur, and it was a bottle of Morgon.
Is that what you would order now to?
Yeah, put us in the mood. Sure, and throw in some Chardonnay. Yeah, I'm a little old school, but yeah.
What was the best piece of advice you ever received?
Take one day at a time. I can't. It's like.
Is there any advice you would like to give our listeners?
Take one day at a time. But make sure you drink wine at least once a day.
That works. What is your proudest achievement in your work to date?
I'd say to be able to guide an estate through transition from conventional to biodynamic farming and really understanding the wines that can come from that type of transformation in the vineyard. And so, yeah, I think Domaine Anderson is really kind of on that edge and in the process. It's always going to be a work in process, but we're going towards the right goal. So,
right. And you were saying that 2018 will be the first bottling where you can say it was biodynamic in the winery as well.
Yeah. So, well, actually not biodynamic, but organic.
Organic.
So organic in the winery, so that I'm allowed then to put organic on the label, which I think we should be very, very proud of, because it takes some extra work and it takes dedication to growing grapes that way, and also taking it one step further and making wine in the organic manner. So really just making wines that are the pure expression of the vineyard.
Complete the following sentence. A table without wine is like...
Not very fun.
Okay. It isn't very fun. So a VIP is photographed by paparazzi in a restaurant, and on the table is one of your bottles sitting in all its glory. Who would that famous person be that you would like to have drinking your wine?
Brad Pitt? Like get that whispering angel out of there and like throw on some Domaine Anderson? I don't know, he's handsome enough, so that would be good.
Okay. I don't think anyone would complain. I'll drink it with him. What sort of wines do you think we'll be drinking in, 200 years' time or beyond?
Everything's getting pretty, well, in California at least. There's some like really, really interesting things going on. So I actually don't think the makeup of the vineyards will be similar. So I think there's going to be a lot of different varietals planted in different places, and it's just going to keep on going more and more that direction. So there's going to be, I don't know about fractured, but it will definitely have a lot more variety. So I think there's more experimentation of varieties in different places, and who knows what's going to happen with global warming. But obviously, I think people have the opportunity, farmers have the opportunity to plant different things now in places that they never really thought would before. Mm-hmm. And the winemaking technology is better, so that we can get stuff ripened and we can make good wines out of, kind of obscure grape varieties. And it's really the variety is the spice of life. So I think that's in 200 years, maybe that's what will happen.
And in 1,000 years?
Oh, gosh.
No. So tell me 3 wines you would want to take with you to a deserted island.
How about that 87 Jordan Cab, bottle of Cristal. Number 3, it would be a Chardonnay, a Burgundy Chardonnay. I'm not really sure the vintage, but something Yves Colon.
And what is one winemaking area in the world that you would still like to explore?
I've never been up to the Okanagan Valley. I'd like to go up to Canada, check it out. Just, I like the Pacific Northwest and that area, and I've never been out there, so it's something I'd like to see.
Interesting choice, but
I mean, I don't, the wines that there I've tasted some good stuff and some okay stuff, but as a tourist, it'd be something I'd like to see.
Great. So as we finish, we like to play a little game. It's called Wine Soundtrack. So wine, sound, music. Mm-hmm. I'm going to name 3 grapes, 3 varieties, or 3 wines, and I want you to tell me what song is conjured up or what you'd want to be listening to while you drink it. Okay? So we'll start with an easy one, and we'll start with champagne.
First thing that comes to my head is Mozart.
Okay. What about an Anderson Valley Pinot Noir?
Aha. I know earlier I said classical. How about the Four Seasons from Vivaldi? I know that's a little cliche, but I kind of like had to, maybe I stuck my foot in my mouth. But I'm trying to think of like some rock and roll songs too. But
but it's all classical that comes to mind.
Well, yeah, but that's what I listen to when I'm in the cellar.
Yeah. What about a white Burgundy?
Led Zeppelin. Gosh.
And what about that 87 Jordan Cab?
Okay, that's so the 80s. I don't know. That would be Aha. I don't know. That's
Well, you had an aha moment with it, so that would be perfect. Yeah. Well, Darrin, thank you so much for joining us today. And before we go, if you can just remind people where they can find you and your wines.
Yes, thank you, Allison. That was a pleasure. And so we are in the Anderson Valley, and that's in Mendocino County, north of San Francisco, about 2.5 hours, in a town called Philo, Philo.
And you have a tasting room?
We do have a tasting room, yes. Open 7 days a week, and it's very charming. I encourage any of your listeners to come out to Anderson Valley. It's the non-busy or non-touristy wine region of California, of Northern California. It's a very bucolic and rustic feel, but and the tasting room is beautiful. It's a wonderful spot in California.
Fantastic. And can we find you on social media?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Domaine Anderson. We're on Instagram and Facebook, and I try to tweet every so often. I mean, I'll try to, get some nice photos from the harvest and just what we're doing, the vineyard and the biodynamics. And so we have our presence on social media. Yes,
but it's better if we come visit you.
Yes.
So thank you.
Please.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.